Hello and welcome to another episode of Infoversity, coming at you live from the School of Information Studies at Syracuse University. Our guest today is Sam Clarvit. Hi Sam, how are you?
Hi Mike, how you doing?
He's a managing director of CCFO Investments and CEO of Clarvit Venture and Technology Advisors.
Yes, sir.
A 2010 graduate, which he was a student of mine way back when, so we've been having a great rapport before this started. At the iSchool at Syracuse University, Sam has built a cross-industry career spanning finance, technology, and venture leadership. He had early roles at JP Morgan Chase and AT Gecko. Sam moved into executive and advisory positions where he helps guide companies through growth, innovation, and strategic investment. Sounds really important. We'll be getting to that for
We'll
sure.
get into it.
Through his work, Sam brings a unique blend of tech fluency, financial insight, and entrepreneurial vision to everything that he does. He's passionate about his role and empathy in human-centered leadership in today's tech-driven and AI-driven world, a theme in which he will explore in the 2025 convocation speaker role that he has coming up tomorrow.
Yeah,
right?
tomorrow.
His message to the next generation of innovators is be human first. Okay, let's talk about that first.
Yeah.
What do you mean by be human first?
At the end of the day, humans aren't code, right? We think we've distilled that down using AI to a little bit of code, but we're not code. We're people at the end of the day. And when you work with other people, you're bringing your diverse backgrounds, your diverse thoughts, different schooling, different educational backgrounds, whether it's at the iSchool or if it's the School of Architecture, the School of Engineering, what have you. Everybody brings that to their table, and everybody has to work with other people. So at the end of the day, the human first aspect is, if you want to be a leader in any of these organizations, you have to be the human first.
Yeah.
We're not code. That's the key message, is really what I'm trying to bring.
That's so smart. So, you've been around a while now because you were a student, and 2010 is a long time ago now. It's 15 years.
Yep.
And so you've seen technology advance.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, rode the wave.
You've always been a tinkerer.
Yep.
And I remember you coming here and meeting your dad.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And now that you've seen how technology has progressed, you see how it advances and improves society. You also see how it can take things away, right?
For sure.
AI is no different.
No question.
So I think your message is really important, because AI is a little different than everything we've seen before, because it does supplant a lot of human activity, right?
At rapid rate, right? This happened almost overnight, it seems like, right? These last 5 years, or last 4.5 years or so, have been blisteringly fast. Way more than the smartphone era of 2007, which we were going through while I was a student.
Yeah. Everybody had one.
Yeah. I bought the first iPad in the city of Syracuse, and I bought it because of my iSchool capstone program.
How long did you wait in line for that thing?
I did go wait overnight. I waited at the Syracuse Mall. I waited overnight, and I got it. First one.
Yeah.
And I brought it for my capstone project because we were presenting what ways could we help reduce the computer load we have in the building.
Yeah.
And our suggestion was give every student an iPad.
Yeah.
And this was before the iPad had even really come out. So it's amazing to see how much that shifted, where nowadays, K through 12, a lot of schools do give kids iPads.
Yeah.
Right? So it's amazing. We were a little ahead of the game on that one. But now you think about AI, it's amazing how fast all these things are changing, right? I could develop a website in 5 minutes where it would have taken me months or weeks or however many days, who knows? So it really is amazing to see the pace of change.
And you and I will talk about that more. But we'll stick to some of the script here.
Yes, of course.
You work for large corporations and startups. So what's one thing you've learned about leadership that sort of transcends all the different settings?
Yeah, it's very different, right? The large organization versus the small startup, where the small startup, you're doing everything. Your job is, yes, you might have a job title, but your job title is ultimately meaningless because you're doing whatever needs to get done to get the job, to get the company moving forward. When you're at a large organization, it's a lot different. You're being managed from the top down, and really the most commonality that you'll find between them is the culture. Ultimately, a startup culture and a large corporation culture, it's all being driven down from the top, but if people don't believe in the culture, they won't want to work for you, right? And that's true for both. And it's also true for leadership styles, right? And that's ultimately the question, is what's the leadership style and how does that differ? And I think because when you're working for a startup, you're doing everything, you are the leader, right? You have to just take ownership for things and just get things done. There's not really asking for permission, it's asking for forgiveness in some cases.
Yeah.
But for a large organization, it's the opposite of that. You can't really ask for forgiveness because in certain cases, especially when I was at JP Morgan Chase, you can't really make those kinds of choices.
There's regulations.
Yeah, exactly. We'll get dinged a lot of ways. So, and I don't want to lose my job. So there's a lot of differences, but there's a lot of commonality, right? The culture is really the main thing. And I think that one thing that a lot of students don't remember when they're going for their interview is you're ultimately interviewing for a culture fit.
Yeah.
Do you fit in with the other people that this manager is building the team around? If you don't, then you're not getting the job, right? That's why I'm ultimately going back to the human first message, because that's really what you're getting hired for. The skills, most of those skills you're gonna have to learn on the job, no matter what, because every job is unique. So the tools you'll use at one company could be very different from the tools you'll use at another. I can't expect you to know that, right?
Yeah.
I'm hiring you to see how well you'll work with us. That's the goal.
Yeah.
And so that's the consistent message between all of them is the cultural fit.
So I have a little follow-up question to that.
Please.
If I were going to interview you for a job and I asked you like the token question, like what's your leadership style? What do you think, how would you respond to what your leadership style is?
Yeah, I'm definitely not what I'd call the hard ass, right? I'm not the stickler. I'm more of a hands-off kind of manager, but I'm a people person too, right? I like engaging with other people, and the trick is in those scenarios you got to manage up and you got to manage down. Yeah. And I think that's also very different from startup culture versus the large corporation culture. Is large corporations, you really do have to manage up and manage down. For startups, you're managing kind of everywhere, right? You have to manage everything because nobody else is going to do it, only you. So yeah, it's fun. It's fun. I'm definitely more of a hands-off though, more of a fun manager style, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's important when, we're hoping that a lot of recent graduates are listening to this podcast.
Yeah.
And, you and I were having a talk offline about you go to university and get some skills that will get you that first job.
Yes.
But you're also getting these life skills,
yes,
right? That will help you succeed in your career as the skills become obsolete and the new skills arrive and emerge. Being able to adapt,
yes,
right? And being adaptable is like so important in today's world, especially if you're going to get a degree from the iSchool.
For sure.
Because so much of our world is being transformed by technology every day, and it's so important, as you say, to keep the people involved in that technology. So I really like your message, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say tomorrow for sure.
Hope you like it.
I'm going to ask you this question because this is the one I really want to ask. So it says, you said your journey started as neighborhood tech whiz. And it says, what sparked your early interest? But I want to know, what is a neighborhood
What is the tech whiz? Well, I will get into this in my speech. I promise I will. When I was 8, I was going around in my neighborhood. I wasn't walking the dog. I was going around and like fixing dial-up internet connections.
Oh,
and
gosh, that's great.
I was fixing like people's computer monitors, and they didn't know what they were doing for some of these things. My favorite, though, and I'm going to cover this in the speech, and none of the students are going to recognize this one, but the VCRs. Do you remember the VCR, what it would be famous for? It was flashing the clock midnight because it was so hard to set the clock.
They didn't put a battery in.
Right.
Well, in their defense, a battery requires an RTC, and then you need a battery and an RTC, and now it becomes a little more expensive. So to cheap out, you can have a clock that, whatever.
But nobody never set them, right? Nobody would set them. So that was my thing going around in the neighborhood as I would go and set all the clocks.
Can you set my microwave? Because that's always flashing.
I can do that too. I do that to my family too, don't worry. But yes, that was actually like the original start, was realizing I could fix all these problems.
Was this like a paid gig for you? Like you went around like people just like mowing lawns?
Yeah, I should have gotten paid. In retrospect, I think I did this wrong, right?
Yeah, I
plowed the snow. I was shoveling the snow away for people for money. So why was I not getting paid for the dial-up connections? Yeah. You're right. Oh man, missed opportunity.
Were you of the generation? You were probably on the tail end of the bulletin board systems, the BBS systems, because you were probably coming out when the internet was pretty prevalent over dial-up, right?
Yep.
But before that, remember the BBS, and there was a lot of great communities that were built around BBSs, and that's one of the things that the internet has always done, is given us a sense of community.
For sure.
People.
I was listening to one of the previous podcasts where you interviewed Jenny Stormer-Galley, and you mentioned Usenet, right? And people still use Usenet, right? It is kind of wild that we develop all these new technologies, but they're still foundationally similar to what we've already been doing in the past.
And that's because I think it's because of people, right?
Yes.
It's like we had Usenet as a way, I'm interested in the Dallas Cowboys, so I can go on a Usenet group.
Right.
Now we have a subreddit.
Correct.
And it's like these things don't change.
No.
And that's what's great about getting old, is that you see the recurring patterns and trends, and then you can distill them down to it's human nature, right?
Right.
We want to be connected to people that we have similar interests with, whether it's photography or hiking or the Dallas Cowboys or whatever it may be, right? So that's great. So as a tech whiz, you'd fix fix clocks and stuff. But what sparked your interest in being the tech whiz?
Yeah.
Was it just like an inherent thing, or did you just like?
Yeah, it was a little bit of all of it, right? Like I realized early on that, first of all, fixing those clocks, I found that so easy, but I was so shocked that everybody else found that so difficult. And so a lot of it was just like, oh, this comes to me more naturally than other people. Okay, maybe there's something more I can do with that. And I think really was when I got a chance to meet Ray Von Dran, the former iSchool dean, the late iSchool dean, who really explained to me like how I could take my love and passion for technology and apply it, right? And that's ultimately what we do here at the iSchool is apply your technology skills. And I think that was really the turning point for me, was realizing, wait, I have all these skills, but I don't know what to do with that, right?
Yeah.
Is there a job? I don't want to fix dial-up for the rest of my life, but is there a job that, I could take those skills and transfer it to?
Yeah.
And the answer was yes, in many different ways. Thanks to the iSchool, absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. And that's it's so true. I don't want to get off on too many tangents. I'll come back to that.
Please.
And I'm going to go through our script here and answer some more questions. But I do have another dial-up question to maybe help the younger folks with the transition from dial-up to broadband.
Yes.
You probably remember when you got your first broadband.
Oh,
right?
my Lord, yeah.
Well, maybe let's just dive into it now because I gave it away. So do you remember when you got your first broadband connection? Right?
Yes, I do.
So for those of you listening, the old folks on the internet, you had no internet, and then what you did was you made your phone that was connected to the wall in your kitchen.
Yep.
You made your computer use that to connect to the internet. And then when you did that, your sister got mad at you because she couldn't call her boyfriend up. Because that's basically the way communications worked back then.
Yep.
And then eventually the cable companies started to sell what we now know as home internet. Everybody has that now, but this was like new and innovative. So do you remember when you first got that?
For sure.
What that was?
Well, first it was changing the coaxial to just be from TV to now also include modem, right?
Yeah,
and
data,
so that was a big shift. I still remember the T1 lines, the T3 lines. Like we were getting like, how fast? Oh my God, you can get 50 megabytes per second. Oh my Lord, what are you gonna do with all of that speed?
It was the latency that really got you, right? Because it was like you weren't able to do anything quickly, but the response time between requests went down because the digital to analog conversion of the telephone modem was what really slowed it down. There was always going to be a cap and a limit as to how fast it could go. And once I got my first broadband, the first thing I noticed was how quickly that was, because it was all mostly a digital signal at that point. And it was like, wow, this is a big difference. Even though the speed wasn't much better.
No.
It was just the fact that you weren't waiting as long for the translation to occur.
God, you remember waiting how long it took for the AOL? You'd hear that for so long. I mean, the irony is that the Infoversity, the intro music, is the dial-up internet connection.
It's the AOL dial-up connection, right? Yeah.
But that, for me, used to take 15 minutes of hearing that sound before I would actually get online versus this is 2 seconds of audio. But yeah, God, switching to broadband, you're right. It was just instantaneous. I would wait forever for a picture to load, right?
Yeah.
It would load one little bit at a time. And 20 minutes later, you finally get the photo and you realized it wasn't the photo you were looking for. You got to go start all over again.
Now, take that and draw a parallel to not having, because you were of the first smartphone generation, right? So now draw that parallel, right? Because we went from, I need to plan my day to go out on the internet, right? Here's the tasks I'm going to do when I finally get connected to the internet. And then think to how the smartphone completely transformed how we communicate and how we work, right? It was like, I need to go to a computer to talk to my friends, and now I can talk to my friends in my pocket, and that was a huge transformation.
Huge shift. Did you read my speech in advance? I don't know.
I did not, and I apologize for stealing your thunder.
No, you're absolutely right, because I actually liken the advancements of the smartphone to how we are today with AI. It's just amazing to see the shift between the smartphone took about 10 years for like the massive level of disruption that we're still seeing.
Yeah.
But AI is doing that in months. And that's what's so shocking, I think, for everybody. But yeah, growing up through the smartphone generation, I mean, I had a BlackBerry first before I even got an iPhone.
Oh, yeah, I remember those BlackBerries with the keyboard, right?
Yes, with the keyboard and BBM, BlackBerry Messenger. That was like, that
was the thing.
That was iMessage before iMessage became the thing, right? And it was, oh, you don't have BlackBerry Messenger? How am I going to connect with you? I'm never going to text you ever again.
Yeah.
Now that's not the case at all anymore, right? Look what happened to BlackBerry. But yeah, growing up through that generation, especially having an always connected computer in my pocket with my email whenever I wanted it, was a huge shift. And I was also on campus while some of these shifts were happening. So how does the university handle Wi-Fi at that scale? And how do we ensure that every student can be online in any, whether they're sitting on the quad or in a campus classroom, right? Or in their dorm room, everywhere had to be connected at any moment. But now I have that in my pocket globally.
Yeah.
And with satellite connections now, really it's globally. I can get it from anywhere, even if I was in space.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah, so it's amazing to see how that shift has happened. But God, we live our entire lives online nowadays.
Yeah.
And the smartphone absolutely helped usher that in. No question about it.
Yeah, that's incredible. I don't mean to steal from your
No,
your
not
talk.
at all. Not at all.
We're just going somewhere. We're ending up at the same place.
It's perfect.
So here,
I guess my speech is still relevant then. That's good.
Yeah, that is. That's great. At least for now. I might be obsolete by tomorrow.
You'll tell me tomorrow.
With the way things are going. Right?
Exactly.
Let's talk more on the script here. So what advice do you have for students who want to follow a non-traditional or cross-industry career path?
Yeah, that's the most fascinating and interesting one, right? Because I started my career in finance and was like, you know what? After 8 years, is this really one I want to still do? And I completely upended my life and shifted completely to a startup that was making batteries. That is absolutely not the same thing, right?
No, it's not.
So how do you translate those skills? And I think ultimately what I realized is that the technology is still the same. The goals we're all still trying to achieve are still the same. It's just how we're going about doing it is different. And so I took all my core fundamentals and beliefs that I took from JP Morgan to the battery startup I was then working at with daily stand-ups and realizing that like how we write code and how we do software can absolutely be applied to hardware in limited capacities, obviously, because hardware you have to repeat over and over again. And with batteries, they are a little bit more susceptible to craziness. So you have to be a little safer with that. But yeah, it was one of those things that I realized that there are so many skills that still do transfer that you would never think transferred.
Yeah.
So it's important for everybody to remember the core fundamentals, right? We learned applying your AI or applying your technology skills here at the iSchool. That is absolutely what you're doing, whether it's finance, batteries, and like any sector that you're looking to go into, it still applies. We're all still using Jira. We're all still using the same tools right, Kanban style. We're all doing the same things. It's just how everybody does it is different. So that's really the shift, was just adapting my skill set to being a little bit more specific to the new industry I was in. But remembering that I bring a lot to the table. That was why I was hired in the first place.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to forget all of my skills. Bring with me what I know and transfer them. So yeah, I think that's the one bit of advice is don't forget that you do bring a lot to the table. There's a reason you were hired, even if it's a new role in a new division or in a new sector, there's a reason you were hired, whether you have that skill or not. They believe in your ability to get to that point and help them succeed. And if not, you'll find what's next, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's ultimately what it comes back to is remember your core skills because they're there.
I think that's one of the things we try to do here at the iSchool is get you thinking like organizationally and institutionally, right? And it's like I said, it's great to have a skill like SQL.
Yeah.
Right?
I still use it. Thank you to you.
Yeah, that's like, we were talking about that earlier.
Yeah.
And it's great to have that skill, right? But to be able to just hop into an organization and be able to draw commonalities about how to operate and how to solve problems, I think is like that's like our school's like secret sauce, right?
Absolutely.
And that's I think why the technology, while important, right, is just one piece of the bigger picture.
For sure.
You know,
that's the
you
human
exemplify
piece,
that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
That's so great. I love that. So how did your experience with the iSchool prepare you for the world? And how are you still to this day I mean, let's not talk SQL. But how are you still to this day applying what you learned?
Well, now we use Snowflake instead of we're using relational databases. It's a little different now.
Yeah. And Snowflake's great.
Oh yeah, it's it's amazing to see how the technology has shifted over the years to just get more efficient, right? That's really ultimately what we're doing, is making efficiencies, and that's ultimately what AI is doing too, right? Is making us more efficient. But to the question of what did the iSchool do for? I mean, God, there's so many. I could spend an hour talking about that conversation, maybe more than an hour on that conversation. I think. First and foremost, it gave me the skills that I needed. No doubt about it, it gave me the skills I needed to apply the technology skills that I knew. Mm-hmm. I love to tinker. We spoke about that briefly. I bought the first iPad, right? I love doing that for a reason, but how do you bring that to the job world? How do you turn that into something that you can make money from? And I found that, right? Like I found that if I bring my passions to work, I can use that there too, right? I don't have to just keep it all at home. I could bring it to my day job. And if anything, it's giving me new skills that other people don't necessarily have. I'm teaching myself, like I taught myself Docker. I taught myself all of these different things at home. And I brought all those skills to work. Mm-hmm. And it made me a better employee.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would say for me, the iSchool taught me really like play around, tinker, learn. You can learn a lot on your own. And especially with AI, you could create anything nowadays, and you could teach yourself. And I'd argue that's the one thing everyone should do nowadays, especially given AI. Learn something new every day, and then have AI give you a quiz at the end of the day on how you did, right? And see how you actually learned. Yeah. Why not? It's so easy and free.
You stole my idea, by the way, because that was one of the things. I'm a really big proponent of using AI in healthy and constructive ways.
Yes.
As a teacher, why would I not? Right?
Of course.
And one of my ideas for vibe coding this summer was to build a platform where you can feed it content like videos, and then it will make quizzes for you.
That's
because
awesome.
Ultimately, it's important to self-assess to learn, right? And this is basically how I learn things. Is when I want to learn Docker, I read about it, play with it, and then I ask myself some questions like, what is this doing?
Right.
What
and
is this
why?
called? Is it an image or a container? What is it? Right now.
And why do I need it this way versus that way? How do I convert it from that to that? What are the environment variables? Why do I need these? What are these going to all do for me?
What is an environment variable, and then why do I use it?
Right.
Right. I mean, those are the things that we always need to be asking ourselves. Yeah. Because, like we said, the technology is going to change. The calculator is just going to get better and better and better, and we have to learn the new ways to interface with it.
Well, I was taught when I was in elementary school that I was not going to always have a calculator in my pocket, so I had to learn something. And how wrong they were about that, right?
Oh, yeah. And you mentioned iPads in schools and stuff like that. And my son, who just recently graduated from high school, he spent his whole 9 years typing on an iPad. That was the computer that his school gave him.
That's amazing.
He used an iPad. I watched him use this thing, and I'm like, this is awful. Because I'm like, he doesn't know how to write anymore because he's been typing on an iPad for 4 years.
And that is a fear, right? Like, does anyone know how to sign their name anymore? Are they even teaching script? I don't think they teach that anymore.
I don't know.
So how are people going to write a check
There's a font you can use for that, right?
DocuSign does do that, right? You don't even need to sign your name. You just type it out, and it gives you a version of your signature. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's another problem that somebody needs to solve at some point. Some federated digital signing, right? It seems like another really cool, interesting idea for someone in the audience.
Did you not just invent blockchain? Is that?
I'm thinking about digital signatures over blockchain, right?
Yes,
or something like that. That would be really kind of a cool thing, so that I can trust something that was signed.
Right.
Yeah,
the smart contracts idea, right? Is that's kind of the whole premise? Is if this piece checks out and this piece checks out. Unlock the contract.
That's right.
But yeah, we have to get better at digital trust. You're absolutely right. I think there's so many methods and ways that we can do that. I mean, we're getting rid of passwords and going to pass keys. We're trying a lot of different methods. I think it's going to be fascinating in the agentic AI era. How do we get around that? Because you can ask an AI to do anything. It'll just keep attacking the problem until it solves it.
Yeah.
What happens in a cybersecurity sense, right? Like if you could just train an AI to keep attacking the same thing over and over again, that's a cybersecurity disaster.
Yeah.
So it's
and then
amazing.
The other side of it too, like the person that writes the code with AI. We've seen this already. There have been a couple people that built their whole startup around vibe coding an AI solution, and there's zero security checkpoints in this stuff, and then they get all upset when their stuff gets hacked, and it's like, well, what did you expect? I mean, there's no solid engineering principles behind this.
Right, and I think
you
that's
made
why
a prototype, which is great, but it's not a product, right?
Right. No, I think that's why it's so great here at the iSchool, right? It's like we teach the fundamentals so that when you look at code, you may not necessarily write all the code yourself. Vibe coding is an amazing thing for a reason now, but you understand the fundamentals and why things should be structured the way that they are, so that when you do look at code, you can be like, wait a second, something doesn't look right here. Maybe you don't know exactly what it is, but you know something is wrong.
Yeah.
That's a key important lesson too, right? So take all of your iSchool learnings and apply it, because that's really where the magic lies.
Yeah. I think that's fundamentally, like, with security, with cybersecurity, a lot of cybersecurity is lateral thinking, right?
Yes.
So much of it is, okay, get out of my lane of thought and move into these other lanes of thoughts and think like someone who's going to do something bad. Like if you look at something simple like SQL injection, right? It's like no one who's honest would ever think of taking a box and putting in code so that code gets executed. The box is for putting your name in or your phone number, not code. Right. And so you have to think like differently, and AI can help with that, right?
For sure.
And so like you can ask the AI, you say like, all right, if I was like going to do something nefarious, what are the potential things? Right. And that's one of the really creative ways I think to use AI is to help you get out of your own like sort of groupthink zone and like
code for the edge cases, right? Because that's the thing. Most people don't think of all the edge cases, right? When you code, you're writing in the negative and the positive, right? You have to think about, if I do this, then this has to happen. But if I don't do that, then this must happen. And that's not a typical way of thinking, right? No. We tend to think more logically than that. And while that is logic, you're also thinking in the inverse, and people don't think that way. So it is very interesting. That's why I agree with you. AI is going to make that so much easier, because you're right. It knows all of the edge cases, code for the edge cases, right? And it will do so. Does it know every edge case per se? Maybe not, right? There are going to be new ones every day. So I think it's going to be fascinating as we get more and more into the agentic AI future that we're heading towards, that we have to be cautious on that.
Yeah. So there's a question here about like takeaways and stuff like that, but I want to go back to our agentic AI. So
oh boy.
What do you think, like, if you're a recent grad or you're a freshman, what kind of AI skills do you think are necessary for someone who comes in as a freshman or someone who's a recent grad? I mean, you played around with a lot of this stuff. I played around with this stuff. We probably have our thoughts. I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, that's a tough question to answer too, right? Because I think whatever I tell a freshman now will be completely obsolete by the end of their freshman year. I don't even know, right? Like,
oh yeah,
it's kind of amazing.
That.
Yeah, so it's hard to give a definitive answer per se, but I think, oh man, I think the thing I would suggest more is learn what the power of these tools are. Learn the use cases and how to apply it the right way. Because we were speaking a little bit before this, but prompting an AI the proper way and adding the right variables and giving it examples, you're going to get a way better output and a more consistent output than if you just ask things willy-nilly. And so I think that's something I would probably trust a freshman with learning first, is like how to use these tools to start.
Yeah.
And then as you go through your career here at the school, how do you learn and advance those skills and apply them better? And learn, right? Ultimately, like adapt those skills and change them over time, because AI is going to keep shifting, right? Yeah. I think in the agentic world, we're talking about like computer use AI.
Oh yeah.
And that's designing an AI to use a computer like a human would. But what if that isn't the future, right? We might not have to build some of these systems for people to use. We're building them for AI to use. Yeah. What does that look like? So I guess I'd also challenge freshmen to think differently in that sense too, right? What could that future be? They would have that answer probably better than any of us would.
Yep.
They're thinking in a very new fashion than we wouldn't be thinking about. So yeah.
Think of let's have a conversation about email.
Yeah.
All right. So email, like and I'm a Gen X, so email for me.
Pop 3.
There was literally regular mail.
Yes.
And one of my first jobs before the company had email was someone would write a memo.
Yes.
And I would shove it into mailboxes, because I was low on the IT support totem pole. So not only did I have to take all the reports that would print out, I would have to put the memos in there as well.
Right.
And so like when we got email, it was a huge innovation, because now you could just type a memo up and disperse it to the whole company, make an announcement.
Instantly.
And you didn't have to print out 75 copies of where the picnic was going to be. You could just tell people. And so like now we're in a world where we can use, well, let's go to your level. So like when you used email,
Yeah.
what was it like?
For the record, we also had the mailroom still
You did.
too. But
yeah, you were on the tail end.
Yeah, I was on the tail end of that. I remember watching the mailroom slowly die out. It is amazing that like yes, you could send out to everybody in an instant, and also the abuse of that in the beginning too was wild and rampant, and how we have to develop new rules around that. And that's also something that's going to be happening with AI. We're in the early days of all that, but we haven't built the wrappers and the rules around what that looks like. And I think Sam Altman and a few other people were in Congress yesterday talking about how, yes, you need to regulate us, but don't regulate us too much, right? Because we need to compete.
That was like the early days of the internet. They're like, we don't regulate us too much, right?
Yes.
Let the wild, wild west go for a bit, so we see where the norms establish, right? I think that's one big thing with AI is like we're still figuring out the norms. Like there's the old meme like, you send me an AI email, and then I use AI to read your email.
Yep.
I'm like, where'd the human go?
Right.
And so, like, I think we're still just trying to figure out where the norms are because it's so new and early.
Yeah.
And that's going to be very interesting because we may see a situation where traditional ways of communication are going to change. And that's one thing that I think you mean when we talk about freshmen.
Yes.
It's like, think of these new innovations and how we can transform and fundamentally shift the way we've always done things.
Yeah.
Because we shouldn't always do it that way because we've done it that way. We did it that way for a reason. It was the only way we could do it.
Right.
And so now that there's new ways, are there different ways to do it? I see a future where like once one AI knows that another AI is on the other end of the communications AI, they now talk AI language.
Right.
You know, they send...
They'll just send JSON packets back and forth to each other,
whatever.
right?
You know,
Like, why not?
Why do they need to like use English or Chinese or whatever anymore? They don't need to.
Right.
They could just talk in ones and zeros or audio signals or whatever, just like they did in the Matrix.
That was one of the other reasons I wanted to come to the iSchool. Like I wanted to be Neo when I was growing up, right? So it was like, hell yeah. I still can't fly like he can, but I'm trying.
So speaking of flying, like you've got that thing on your chest. Is that like for Tony Stark or something?
A little
What's
bit.
that thing do?
Yeah, talking about AI. This is we got more microphones here that I need, but this actually is recording all of my in-person conversations and transcribing it for me so that I can answer with AI. What do I need to remember from today? Because most things you lose in the conversation. How many of your students are sitting in your class not taking enough notes, and they come back to their test and they realize they didn't remember everything because they didn't take all the notes they needed?
Yeah.
I was really bad with that. Maybe you don't remember that as my time as a student. I still did okay, but it's been really hard for me. I had surgery on my hand a few months ago, and so writing has been very difficult. So instead, I've been relying entirely on this to take almost all of my notes for me during my day. And at the end of every day, I get a notice that says, here's everything you need to know from today. And I can ask it more questions. But yeah, I do feel a little bit like Tony Stark, although it's not the heart-beating element to it. But yeah, and this one is actually, speaking of Sam Altman, he backed this company, Alexis Ohanian, we mentioned Reddit. He backed this company, and A16Z, which is Andreessen Horowitz, also backed this one.
Oh, okay, wow,
So hopefully,
we got some backing right
knock
there.
on wood, it sticks around for a little while, but for me, it's been truly helpful.
What's the battery life on that thing?
24
I'm
hours.
Nerd out, I'm sorry.
Yeah, please, 24 hours. It lasts the whole day.
Okay.
USB-C.
And then how long does it take to recharge?
Better.
Like overnight or something?
Yeah, I do it overnight, but you could probably do it
So
in
once a
15,
day,
20
you put
minutes.
it on like your nightstand or whatever, and then next morning you're ready to go again.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. I think something like that would be incredibly useful. I see applications of that for people that, like I have older relatives that are developing like dementia and Alzheimer's, and I've been thinking long and hard about ways that I can improve their lives through technology.
I mean, I'm using this for the exact reason you mentioned. I'm going for physical therapy. I never remember all the instructions that I get that I need to do, right?
I mean, when you go to where you go to the doctor's office, like there's a whole psychology of people that go to the doctor's office and they're riddled with so much anxiety that they don't hear a word that their physician tells them.
Or the physician says something in what they think is a different language, but it's medical terminology. They just don't understand what that means. And they've forgotten all about it, or they can't read it out because it's written in Latin, and they don't know what that means. But I'm getting that live as we're speaking, and for me, like I went to the doctor while wearing this, as a matter of fact, and he's transcribing his own notes into the computer, and it's missing half of the things he's trying to say
because it's going in real time.
Real time, but it's so slow because it's technology from the 90s. Talk about advancements that we've gotten now, and my pen picked that up all of what he was saying instantaneously and accurately, better than even his computer system was getting it.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. And now I know exactly what issues I was having and where I need to go follow up with. Right?
Have you had anybody that like doesn't want you to have that thing on
Yes.
or around you? They're like, no, please turn that off. What is that thing on your chest? I don't want you to record me.
You're absolutely right. We have to now think about privacy laws, and it's state by state, right? So like in New York State, it's a single party requirement, which means as long as I consent to recording, that's all that's required.
Yeah.
But if I were to call someone from California, and that's a two-party state, I have to let them know I'm recording first, and they have to agree to that. So they actually do tell you when you wear this, you should inform people that you're doing so. And I don't want to be disingenuous. I want to make sure that they know it's happening, but I also am using this for my personal benefit, and hopefully people don't take any issue with that. But I can always stop the recordings, and it's not listening when you go to the bathroom, and it's not, like, there's certain things that you definitely make sure you don't want it to listen to, of course. But yeah, if you're talking badly about someone behind their back, it's going to capture all that too, right? So you got to make sure you know what you're doing.
Can it quantify the number of ums and uhs I say in a day, you know?
For me, it says don't even count anymore. It's too much.
I love it. I think it's a great concept.
Yeah, to augment, right? Like I'm
Yes,
using it
yes.
to augment my
Absolutely.
ability. And I think that's really what we got to talk about is like the fact that we're using technology to augment our lives, not replace it. And
100%. I mean, I think that's the message that I'm sure is in your speech tomorrow.
Yeah.
And you and I both know this is where AI has the real benefits. Again, we're in that early phase where we're still figuring out norms.
Yeah.
And we are doing a lot of supplanting of thinking of AI, which has me concerned. But I do think there will be a leveling off at some point because people are people and humans are humans. And ultimately, while we're figuring it out, you know, higher ed has to change.
Yes.
Student behaviors have to change. Workplaces have to change. We all have to adapt to this. I think one of the things that's been discouraging is I'll see, like, for example, in schools where they want to ban it.
Yes.
And it's like you can't ban you can't put the genie, as we say, back in the bottle.
Exactly.
There's no banning at this point. There's only figuring out how to adapt and then move on. Right?
And we have examples of this in the past, right? When I was a student, we couldn't reference Wikipedia.
Oh yeah. That was
Right?
that was like a cardinal sin.
Right.
If you use Wikipedia, that was like, you know, that was AI. Like if you brought up on academic integrity AI,
Right.
you know, academic integrity problems, you use Wikipedia. You know, it was okay to use an encyclopedia.
Right.
Because you had
Same
to
thing, though.
use your feet.
Right.
Use the encyclopedia. But you can't use Wikipedia because it's incredibly convenient for you to do it. You know, it's like,
It was a wild time, but now you see it referenced in papers being submitted for scholarly work all over the place, right? For medical papers, you're seeing it all over the place. Yeah. And we're going to see that shift with AI eventually too. But you're right. I'm always concerned about the schools that ban AI for the exact reason you mentioned.
Yeah.
But also, these students are going to have to use it one day anyway. We weren't banned from using a calculator in math class, right? You shouldn't be banned.
I was, but you know.
Well, I was in the beginning, you're right.
Yeah.
But over time, you weren't, right? Because they realized the calculator's not going away.
No, it's not.
You have to use the tools that are at your disposal. And yes, you're right. The thought of replacing your knowledge or enriching your knowledge is definitely the dichotomy we work through. But like, you need to use it to enrich your knowledge, not replace it. And that's what we need to keep emphasizing more than anything else.
I'm excited about how it has the potential to move everybody, all of society, up the thought stack.
Yes.
Right? Because, like, I'll give you a great example, like with physical labor. Like, at one point, we didn't have, like, steam engines or diesel engines, so, like, people just dug holes.
Yeah.
Right? Hundreds of people dug holes. Yeah. And then we had, like, a steam shovel, and that would dig holes, and it's like, oh, that was great, but it wasn't very reliable. And then we had, like, hydraulic excavators and diesel equipment, and that seems to be, like, the pinnacle of digging holes, right? And it's
but we created new jobs by doing that, right?
You got it, right?
Yeah.
And we also, because of our ability to trivialize digging holes, we've advanced in so many ways, right? And I think that's what we're seeing with technology, right?
Yeah.
Is that this is just changing the norm so that nobody has to focus on a for loop anymore.
Right.
It's like, you know,
Right.
or like, you know, things like stacks and queues, conceptually, those ideas, while their understanding is important, knowing how they're built is not necessarily relevant anymore. Right.
But back to the idea of job titles being ultimately arbitrary is the fact that we used to have, we called them quants, Now we
Yeah.
call them data scientists.
Yeah.
The job function didn't change.
Nope.
What we called them did, but it goes back to like, you got to learn the skills and the skills will apply. I'm a managing director. What does that ultimately mean? It means I manage and I direct, right? But what does that really mean? It could be anything, right? So yeah, it's really, you got to just do whatever the job is at the end of the day, and whatever your skills, you bring your skills to the table to push the company forward, and that's what you're there for.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We've shifted over time, and technology has helped us shift that over time. And yeah, we're not digging holes by hand anymore now, right? Now we have machines that can help us do that, and we have a person who has to service the machine. That was a job that didn't exist before.
No, it did not.
Right? And we're going to have the same thing in the AI future, right? Is like, who's going to service the systems that work for AI, right? Not that we want to get into this Skynet discussion of are we helping the robots or the robots helping us, but I think it's very much both, right? Like we're trying to learn almost from each other. It's almost like another animal that we're learning from, right? It really is very different. And you're right, they're speaking a different language in some cases. Do they need to speak English? I don't know. Maybe they won't in the future.
Yeah.
Maybe there's probably a more efficient way of doing it.
Yeah.
There must be. We're not very efficient otherwise.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting where we've evolved AI because when way back when I was in college, we learned about neural nets, and the one thing the professor said to me is that these are great, but we have no practical use because we don't have the computational capability to do anything useful with them, other than to build like 12 neurons and say, okay, look, there's weights in neurons, but we can never connect enough of them to garner general intelligence,
Right.
Or simulate the general intelligence on the neural net.
And you're almost doing that down on your phone nowadays, right?
Yeah,
Which is amazing.
You know, and that, there's so many things that have just, because technology has gotten smaller and faster and better, have become more capable.
Right.
That it just existed so long ago, and we just said, okay, well, we can't really use this today, and then now is today.
Right.
You know?
When we finally got to the memory bandwidths you can handle,
Sure, yeah.
GPUs can process significantly faster than a CPU. And so we needed all those advancements to kind of happen and fall into place before the dominoes could fall to that point, right? So it is amazing. I think we were learning, you mentioned COBOL earlier.
Yeah.
We still have that. We still have systems that run on that, which is amazing. We still use like mainframe systems today.
Yep.
And we won't ever change that for certain reasons, right? Like JP Morgan famously has a lot of them, because if you swipe your credit card and it doesn't process in a 2-second time span, you're losing your mind.
Yeah.
That can only happen with a mainframe to that level of scale. But who knows, with AI, we might be shifting a lot of things. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. I want to ask you a question on this. So we know that AI is really good. It's a very good, like I like to say, it's a very good librarian. Right?
Yes.
It's an information retriever. It has a knowledge store. It knows a lot of things, right? And we know that you have to rein it in, right, and stuff like that. Do you see like a future where AI can help in certain careers more than other?
Yeah.
And do you have an
for sure.
opinion on which careers those might be?
Yeah, it's a great question, and you're kind of tackling into what I do for a living, which is like trying to predict the future, right? I'm ultimately looking for companies to invest in that are advancing society into the future that we want it to be. And so, yeah, it's the greatest question. I think there's so many technologies that we're still building, right? We're still learning how they work, and AI is one of those great examples. And so I think it's going to be interesting. I don't know if there's an exact job where it's going to be completely supplanted yet by AI. I mean, there'll be aspects of jobs that are supplanted, but I don't think entirety of jobs are supplanted, and that's back to the human element side of things, right? Is you got to still work with other people, and people build companies, not AI.
Yeah.
AI can help you build your company, but you're the one building it. And so I think there's tasks that will get shifted, right? Like, especially from a startup perspective, you're doing everything. You're the CEO, and you're the lawyer, and you're the finance person, and you're the IT guy all in one. But you don't always have all those skills, right? So AI is going to help that front, right? Like, I can have it read the legal contract for me and point out all the holes that I should avoid, right?
Yeah.
I could help some of the IT backlog that I have going on so I could focus on my day-to-day work. It's the little pieces like that, I think, more than anything that are going to shift. We're still too early in the process to know how significant I think job changes are going to be.
Yeah.
But I do know that we're going to have new types of jobs that we didn't have before. We didn't have the title of Uber driver before
No, we
before
did not.
smartphone era, right? Like,
Yeah.
and that's a great example of another company that couldn't have existed before the smartphone. We don't know what the new companies of the future that exist because of AI. We haven't gotten to that point yet. We're still too early in that process. So that's what I'm excited to see. And then we'll see what the jobs look like after that.
No, that's
But,
totally
yeah.
fair, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No,
like
not at
that,
all.
But I fundamentally agree with you. I think that this will usher in another, like we had the internet boom,
Yep.
right, and then we had the smartphone boom,
Yep.
and
We're in the AI revolution now.
This is going to be the next big boom, right? And we're going to see a lot of new industries arrive.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
a lot of different ways that humans will work because of this. And hopefully it takes some of the more unpleasant work that people do out of their hands. Because like if we go back to digging the holes, it's like that could not have been a fun job.
No.
But I tell you what, running an excavator is a pretty fun job.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so I mean, hopefully we see more of things like that come
I agree.
out. And I think there will be a transformation of the workforce.
Yeah.
And there'll be a new set of knowledge that needs to be learned, of course. But it's going to be exciting, I think. I think, like I said, once we get through the whole, you know, what are the norms, right?
Yeah.
And we accept what those norms are.
Yeah.
And we say, no, that is not the right way to do this. I think once we get through that, I think, we'll be in pretty good place.
I agree. I mean, AI and all of these tools are as fallible as humans are, right? Because we're the ones making it.
Yep.
So you're absolutely right? It's like we're going to be the ones defining what that future looks like. But it's all the more important that we get it right now because, especially in the AI era, garbage in, garbage out. I know you hear that every day,
yeah,
right?
and it's very true with AI too.
It's amplified.
That's why
with
it
AI.
hallucinates, right?
Right.
Well, we ask it to emit a response, and it doesn't know anything. Therefore, it hallucinates.
Right.
People hallucinate all the time, right?
Yeah.
Just ask my brother-in-law. I'm kidding.
No comment, and I won't. But no, you're absolutely right. It's not about your brother-in-law, but about other things. It's going to be interesting though. It's whatever we make it to. So if we put in bad data, it's going to amplify that bad data tenfold out, right? And so we definitely need to make sure we get it right now. That's why I think it's so important that we teach it the right way here as well.
And that's, I think, a great future skill set for especially iSchool students, right, is evaluating AI, right?
Yeah.
And assessing its capabilities and areas, measurements
Right.
of and forming, help forming benchmarks for various tasks, right? And there's a lot of benchmarks that are out there now, but they're very baseline benchmarks, like how well does it code and things like that.
And they've kind of been fighting back and forth about also if they've been gaming the system to a
got
degree
it,
either, right?
There's a little bit of that going on.
Right.
It's like, okay, so like, and that happens in academic work when they try to do benchmarking. It's like, okay, well, now all of a sudden there's a new model and it blows your benchmark out of the water. It's like, well, of course it does because there's a published paper that it could use.
Corporate world too, right? It's exactly the same. But we benchmark constantly on everything, but there's no historicals on this, right? How do we benchmark on something entirely new? And so you're right. It's going to be very interesting. I think using the right tool, and this has always been the case, right? Is like you find the right tool for the problem you're trying to solve. And it's the same for these AI models, right? You got to find the right model from the right provider to fit the solution and the problem you're trying to solve.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's so important we have a chance to play with everything. I mean, it's great that so many of them are free to start because it gives you that opportunity to do it. And that's obviously why it's free to start.
Yeah, I know.
But still, it's great that you, especially students, get the opportunity because that's the most crucial time to learn it is when you're actively learning so many things and you're not distracted by the day-to-day that you have to do in your work life. Embrace that. Learn as much as you can, especially while you're here, right?
Yeah.
Like learn as much as you can because you're not going to get the same types of opportunities when you're working in the day-to-day.
No. You got a job to do.
Yeah, exactly. Doesn't mean you're not using and you're not still learning every day. It's just different,
Yes,
right? And so it's
absolutely.
important you get a chance to do it the way that you can now while you're a student. So
Yeah. One of the blessings of being a student is you get to fail gracefully, right?
Yes.
Right. That's kind of the whole point is we want you. I mean, I'm not talking about failing a class.
No.
I'm talking about you do something and you do it wrong and you learn from that.
Right.
And there's no real major impacts. Of
Right.
that, right. That's what being at a university is all about.
For sure. You're freeing yourself up from the dangers of making the biggest mistake in a corporate world that you cannot make. Right? There are real implications to that. But when you're a student, you're absolutely right. The implications can kind of minimize or almost go away entirely. And so, yeah, as long as you're not blowing up the university network with traffic and you're not doing anything you're not supposed to be doing here, you can almost scot-free learn a lot, right? So yeah, it's pretty impressive.
It does make me wonder about like the universities of the future that embrace, well, of the very recent future that are going to embrace AI. Like we're pretty AI friendly here
Very
at
much
SU.
so. Yeah.
But being able to provide that AI to students so that people aren't paying out of their own pocket, and not just like committing to one model, right? Because as you and I both know, like all these models have different capabilities.
Yeah.
And so that I think is going to be a very interesting challenges for universities going forward that are going to be friendly with AI, not just from here I want you to use it to help write a better paper or something, or maybe research your sources, but also from a iSchool perspective where we want to build and tune models that do certain tasks. Yep. And we want to be able to evaluate those tasks against different stock models. Right. And that's something that I think is going to be a unique challenge for schools like our school going forward with AI, is we need to be able to provide that for our students.
And especially here at Syracuse, where we have a diverse population of students who are doing and learning a lot of different things, you need a different AI model to study chemistry than you would to do coding, right? Yep. They have different purposes and different functions and are trained on very different models. So, and different data sets entirely, and I could go into different companies I've seen that are training different data sets and how they're doing it, and some of them are doing it very interestingly, and some that are doing it sometimes entirely wrong, and you're like, oh my God, what are you doing, and why are you doing it that way? We saw a company that was trying to detect cancer, and the way that they were doing it was they were training the model to use, like they trained it on cancer pictures, but every time they trained it, the picture had a ruler on it to show how big the cancerous cell was. Yeah. And so when they started feeding the AI cancer, but with no ruler on there, it just said, yeah, it's not cancerous, because basically what they created was a ruler detector. Yeah. And that's not a good way to train a model, right? You got to think about the data you're putting into it. And so absolutely here at the university, where it is going to be unique per even school, right? The iSchool is going to have a very different need than communications, than Whitman, than chemistry and biology. They all are going to be different, and they're going to need different models that are focused more towards what they need. And so you're right, it's going to be a very interesting problem for a lot of these companies to solve, right? Because everybody's going to come at this differently. Yeah. And so when I look for an investment in technology, in an AI, for example, I look for those special cases because they own the data set. Nobody else owns the data set more than they do. They have all of the highest quality training data. Mm-hmm. Nobody else will be able to compete with them. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for ones that have access to unique opportunities that nobody else can touch. Yeah. And especially in the AI world, that's the only way you can, especially from my point of view, invest in AI. Sure, yeah. Because I can invest in OpenAI. Yeah. Maybe not the greatest valuation now. I wouldn't make a ton of money off that now. But it's not the same feeling I would get versus investing in a company that's going to be at the forefront of some major breakthrough using their AI model. That's what I'm excited about. So yeah, it's going to be a crazy and wild future, but you're right. I think it's going to be interesting to see how the universities tackle all that too.
That's an interesting point that you brought up that I want to reiterate and frame for students, and that is what's probably not investable in the future with AI is I built some awesome thing that uses OpenAI, right? That's not going to move. That's not going to advance things forward, right? That's merely an application, and in many ways, we already talked about. You could probably vibe code a lot of that
for sure.
And so that's not where you're looking to the future.
Right. It's not going to start the next $1 billion business for you, right? Yeah. It might help you get to an MVP. Sure. Right. You need to start with a minimum viable product to start any business. Maybe it'll get you there, but it's not how you're going to build the business. You need to start somewhere and then take it from there. So,
and then with that MVP, to be clear to students, we're not trying to stifle innovation, but with that MVP, you can say, here's a concept, and now to really make this thing sing, I need to build my own model.
Right. I've proven that this is a real need. Somebody's using it to solve the problem. Right. That's what you're trying to prove is I have something that people want.
Yeah. And that's what's exciting about AI is it gets people with ideas in their head to investable much faster than it ever has. Yeah. And that I think is as someone who's traditionally been a programmer, I might be threatened by that, but I'm not threatened at all. I'm actually excited to see what the future holds when I can get things out of when people can get things out of their head and show the world what that looks like.
Sure.
You know, it's going to be a great world.
And as a programmer, you probably got a chance to learn and teach yourself new languages using AI, right?
Oh, yeah,
There's so many applications and things. Like, I'm not as good at Swift as I am at Python, so I'm teaching myself Swift using AI, right? Like, it's amazing that you could do something like that and transfer the skill. Whereas, you probably used to have to spend months and months and months learning some of these things or building some of these things, and now you can do it in seconds. Yeah. So it is kind of wild.
What's neat on that is when you learn to code, like for example, I know I could write JavaScript, but it takes me forever.
Yeah.
Because I just don't do it all the time. So when I need something in JavaScript, I go to AI, and I know exactly what I want.
Yep.
And I can give it an example in Java or Python or whatever and say, this is exactly what I want.
Right.
And then it writes it for me in JavaScript. And that's fantastic. And it's a wonderful way to pick up other languages and other idioms that you need from the languages or from the task you're doing. But that goes back to having a skill that isn't necessarily programming the way we knew it, but understanding which concepts are necessary to compile and put things together, right? So it's like you're no longer extruding out Lego pieces. Those are there for you. You're just assembling the toy out of the Legos, right? So it's pretty neat.
I like that you use Legos and not IKEA furniture, by the way. So
that's so funny. That is very true. We got to get close to wrapping up. So I want to ask you this little final question. It says, what's the one thing you hope graduates walk away from as you give your speech tomorrow?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm going to hammer the point home, I think, beyond belief tomorrow, but really the human first element is the key message, right? That's what I'm trying to remind people of, is that we all are stuck behind our phones or we're stuck behind a computer screen all day. That's not how you're going to advance in your company. That's not how you're going to advance your company, right? Either advancing in or advancing your company. You need to be human. You need to work with others. And I think we learned after the pandemic that we were all remote and how much that changed how we interacted with others versus when we finally came back, right? And I think the students now, and especially the graduates now, have felt that more than anyone. They graduated from high school during the pandemic and came to university where they had to meet all these new people in person, and they hadn't spoken to people in person in over a year, right? So that was a huge shift, and I think that's the important thing I want to remind the graduates of, is that you're going to go work for a corporation and you're joining because of that cultural fit, and that cultural fit is how you work with others. Mm-hmm. They're going to teach you the skills you need because you learned a lot here at the iSchool, but you didn't learn everything I need you to know to do the job I want you to do at the end of the day. So I'm going to teach you that. That's the point. That's why I'm hiring you now, right? Is to teach you the skills I need you to know so I can then move on with my job and you can keep doing what you're doing, right? But being human first and remembering that you got to relate to others, and that's the only way you're going to ever advance your career. It's not always about the skills you know. It's who you know and how you use that too. Yeah. Managing up, managing down. Unfortunately, getting to play a little bit of the office politics, and that's a skill that a lot of people have to develop over time, is an important skill to learn too, and that's relating once again to people. Yeah. You don't do that with technology. So yeah, the human element, especially here at the iSchool, is the important part of the message. But I think the other thing is really try to learn something new every day, right? We explained that earlier, how easy it is with AI to keep teaching yourself a new skill, and you should. I mean, you're going to bring those skills to any future job, or even the current job you're going to be taking. It could be as simple as we were talking about with Docker and understanding containerization and how all of that works. You're going to probably use that in the corporate world nowadays, whereas 10 years ago you weren't, right? So it is amazing to see how that shifts, but if you're playing around at home for free wherever you can, you're going to learn that you could take that skill into your career as well. So always learn something new and remember to be the human person at the end of the day. That's the key message.
Sam, that's a great message, and I thank you for your time. This was great.
Yeah, it really was, Mike. Yeah. Thank you so much for doing this. And thank you for not giving me a quiz on my old IST 459 material that I still managed to find.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
Thank you for not asking me any SQL questions, because I'll have to break out the AI again to help me with that.
That's right.
But Mike, thank you so much for the time. I appreciate it.